Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to this third session, or what is the online training session on STI policy and policy instruments for SDGs for Asia and the Pacific. My name is Fernando Santiago. I am working for UNIDO, Vienna. I'm a user policy officer, and I have the honor to sort of be with you today, moderate and guide you through this session. I appreciate those who have made it in time, and of course we would like to see more people like we have had in the previous sessions, but in the interest of time and for those of you who have made the effort to join, let's start. Today, again, as you know, the training will be conducted in English, and we are recording. We kindly ask that please, the audience has no access now to the recording because it's creating some challenges for us on the back end to keep the recording. And many of you have requested to have access to the recording, so we would like to just please bear with us on that part. Yeah? So the recordings and the presentations will be made available after the workshops, the 4 sessions. As interest of creating a good space and for the quality of the experience, please, for those of you who are not participating, keep yourself your camera off and your microphones muted. But of course, please feel free to use the chat, ask questions, share comments, not only to the speakers, but also to the participants, right? To the other participants, you are welcome to have an interaction. And I think it's also important that you share experiences through the chat, yeah? As has been the practice, I will just briefly introduce the IATT team. I know many of you have been thankfully joining us for the previous days, but if any of you is new, of course, we try to reiterate some of the key messages that we would like to convey, right? So a review of the session, and then of course, we would like this for you to warm up a little bit on the Mentimeter question, the survey, which is something that we use to keep some interactivity with us, right? Just a background on the group. We were formed officially in 2017, and this is a group that brings together several UN agencies. You see some of them there. We have also strong collaboration with regional economic commissions or regional offices, and like in this case, of course, our colleagues in the UNESCO Jakarta office, which is we are very thankful for the time and the support. And of course, many of the activities that we do consist on the delivery and design and delivery of joint trainings and materials on STI for SDGs. And this is also an opportunity for us to have some additional partnerships with other entities, like you see the universities, the Research Commission, the European Commission, the Joint Research Center. And so this is really a very interactive and also a partnership effort. We have been doing this for the last 5-6 years, actually. A mix of online, particularly after the pandemic or during the pandemic, online trainings and in-person trainings. You can see there has been a lot of interest in Latin America, but also in Africa and Arab states. This is the first time we do a sort of a dedicated training for Asia. So this is, of course, for us, a very interesting opportunity and hopefully one of many more to come. But you can see here, there has been quite a strong participation from Latin America, but we also see other countries. And of course, the idea is that we cover more and more. And we see this, there is a strong participation from female participants, right? The work stream, in addition to creating the space for trainings, we have also some materials, and those are at your disposal through the website. And here, let me just, I need to acknowledge the support that we receive as UNIDO particularly received support from the government of the Republic of Korea that has enabled us to not only to participate in some of these meetings, but also to produce some background material for you to use. For example, this booklet that is available in different languages, and you are welcome to download. And of course, it's part of the activities that we provide, and summarizes some of the activities, some of the concepts that it's a background document that you can read. For this particular workshop, we have completed 2 sessions. The one on introductory session on approaches to STI. Yesterday, we had the session on policy instrument design. Today, we go a bit deeper into the actual implementation and see what is the the sort of main challenges and opportunities and lessons learned from the implementation of these instruments. Tomorrow, the closing one would be on policy monitoring and evaluation. So this is a full cycle, at least to sort of what we can do in these short sessions, right? For today, we have, after this sort of a welcome remark from my side, we would have a triggering presentation by UNESCO, then followed by the first sort of a case study from colleagues from UN-IATT. We will have a beautiful discussion. And then we will move on to the country experiences and some of the sort of main challenges by the JRC and the STEPI. Of course, again, the open discussion, and then I would sort of have a closing segment. Of course, you are welcome, as I said, to use the chat, to use the exchange with the speakers and among yourselves. And we will have also some Mentimeter questions for you to interact with us and also to capture some experiences, some of your knowledge. This is the team here. Some of course, not everybody is shown here. This is the team who has been, that will be involved today or has been in the background. We have a colleague, Manuel Galindo from UNESCO, who is a science and technology innovation policy expert with extensive experience in STI governance on national and international levels. He has conducted several policy reviews for many international organizations. He will be delivering the triggering presentation. Oscar Fast will be next, and he is currently working as an Associate Economic Affairs Officer within the Innovative Policies Development section of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, the UNACE, and his work focuses on strengthening the innovation systems of Central Asia and Ukraine. Then we will have one of the first case studies or sort of the examples, our colleague Angela Salchina, from who is currently the project leader for the Science, Technology, and Innovation for SDGs at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And she provides targeted assistance to countries, particularly in Africa and the EU neighborhood, to integrate SDGs into the STI policies and then fostering place-based innovation for sustainability. And then the last case study will be presented by Dr. Im Yong Sun. She is the head of Sustainable Innovation Policy Research at the Science and Technology Policy Institute, STEPI, in the Republic of Korea. Her experiences in policy agendas arising from the intersection of STI and international relations, and her recent research focuses on STI for global challenges, research security and integrity, and science diplomacy. Our colleague Dimo will be also moderating the chat. Chen Mei and colleague Min have also been supporting the organization of this. As I mentioned, we have, as a practice, been using the Mentimeter. Please, if you can share this. So this is there are two ways to participate. For those of you who have a mobile phone, you can see the QR code there. You can just scan it. You will be taken directly to the question. And then for those of you who are just on your computer, you can go to the chat and you can look for the link. Once you have the link, you will be able to access the question, right? So and please, I see. Let me see how many people we have so far. I see 123 participants. Of course, some of us are counted there. But please, the idea here is to start, for you to familiarize with the use of Mentimeter, but also for us to know a little bit of your background, how much experience you have, in this case, with the implementation of STI instruments. And I see majority of you, some balance, yeah. So a fair number says that this is the first time you are introduced to the topic of implementation, while others are somewhat familiar, right? So I am familiar with implementation. So yeah, probably more than half either have been already familiar or just first time. So please, I mean, as I said, I see only 40-something participants, but giving an answer, but many of you are there. So just try to locate scan the QR code if you can. on your phone, or just look for the link in the chat. After this, of course, we will start. But this is, as I said, is just for you to start getting familiar with the tool that we will use throughout the session, and we have been using throughout the courses, this workshop, and then of course, yeah. So I see there's again first balance, very fair balance between those who have not been introduced, or this is the first time you have access to the topic, and those of you who have been working on this. So let's stop there and then just continue with the session, please. So what I would do now is to call on our colleague Manuel Galeno. Please, if you have you have the screen. Yeah, you please share your presentation and we can start. Manuel,
Okay.
for you.
Thank you. Okay, let me start sharing my screen.
And while you do so, please, colleagues and please, participants, feel free to engage in the. I see already some engagement in the chat, so please go ahead. Go ahead, Manuel. Thank you.
Excellent. So, can you please confirm that my slide is properly shown?
Is there? Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Well, as you already know, my name is Manuel, and I'm working with UNESCO in the Science, Technology, Innovation Policy section. And in this session, we're going to discuss about what are the challenges and the good practices for implementing STI policy instruments. We have already been discussing the topic about design, but today we are going to focus on the actual implementation. So to start, I would invite you to go to another Mentimeter question and start engaging with us. And can you please, I invite you to either scan the QR code, and try to join with the question. I will remind you that this type of question is a ranking question. And on your right side, you will have the opportunity to place your best your answer in the order that you consider relevant. So in this case, we want to know which ones are the most challenging areas when it comes to implementing the policy instruments. So just very quickly, when we talk about implementation process, it's just the operational aspect of putting the instrument into action. When we talk about management quality, we're talking about the leadership structure and the leadership and organizational structures. When we're talking about when we talk about monitoring and evaluation, well, we want to know we want to track progress and know what works. When we talk about learning systems, is how do we incorporate the lessons that we learned through our monitoring and evaluation systems into the new implementations. Of course, we have coordination issues, funding issues. So please, I invite you to continue answering. I see that you are doing it well. Yes. I think that we are starting to get some consensus. Yes, of course, the operational aspect is very challenging, and we will start going a little bit more in detail into each of these dimensions. I'm surprised that the funding is going to the third one. Okay, that's very good. That's very good. I think this is this is very interesting because we start thinking about what are the areas that are more challenging. We start identifying where we need to pay attention, and this is also very useful for you to understand the structure of the presentation today. So I think that with this, I think that we reach more or less consensus. implementation processes, the operational aspects is the first one. We talk about stakeholder engagement, funding, continuity of implementation over time. These two are of course related, coordination, management, quality. Okay, excellent. So let's start our presentation now. Okay. So you see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let me just summarize a little bit what we saw just now. We have been discussing over these days, of course, that science, technology, innovation policies are essential, but it's very important to acknowledge that the true impact depends on execution. And I would like to just highlight a few critical challenges that we face. As we saw, limited resources is one of the key challenges of implementations. We are not only countries don't only lack funding mechanisms, funding sources, but also skilled personnel. Another area that is important is that countries often have overestimate their implementation capabilities. And this leads to unrealistic plans and sometimes unrealistic timelines as well. And as we also saw, coordination complexities. This is an important challenge. Implementing an STI policy instruments that needs to bring different stakeholders, and this makes communication is difficult, alignment of interest is complicated, and this really brings inefficiencies in the process. So these are three challenges that we see recurrently. But if we start looking into how to address these challenges, I have an invitation to make, and the invitation is that we start thinking about implementation processes and the implementation of our policy instrument in these 4 dimensions. And these 4 dimensions comes from a work that we did at UNESCO, where we developed a global outlook on the implementation of policy instruments for the SDGs. And this is an analysis that included some literature review and field research, and also took information from UNESCO's costing platform. And my colleagues will be sharing a link in the platform, in the chat box, so you can consult. So just if we want to address these challenges, I invite you to think about in these 4 crucial dimensions. We already saw them in the Mentimeter question, but let's go through them again. The implementation process, this means what are the operational steps taken to put the policy instrument into action. The management quality, we're talking about the effectiveness of the leadership and the administrative structures. Monitoring and evaluation, how we track progress and assess impact. And of course, the learning systems, which refers to what mechanisms exist for continuous improvement. So we're going to go in detail into each of these policy dimensions. So let's go to the implementation process. As I said, this refers to the operational steps. And let's start with the strategic outreach and clear selection framework. In this point, we want to know who are our beneficiaries and how to reach them. You know, like if we have a policy instrument that is trying to reach students, we need a different approach to ones that are trying to reach the private sector. An example is that if we want to advertise a scholarship instrument, maybe using social media would be sufficient, and it would be a good medium actually. But if we want to reach a private sector, then we need to think about complementary solutions, which can be workshops and demonstrations where we really have a space to explain the instrument, explain the application process, the selection criteria, and make sure that we have a constant live engagement with the beneficiaries. Something that is quite important in this area is really defining clear and transparent selection processes. And this is very important because we need to build trust, we need to build legitimacy, and through these mechanisms, we really can attract better applicants. The second point, I want to focus on the operational delivery and financial mechanisms. And here the focus is what channels we use to deliver our support. And with this, I mean, do we need a central unit to deliver our support? Do we want to use a distributed approach through regional channels? We need to outsource implementation. And an example of this is that, let's go back to our scholarship example. If we talk about this type of scholarship instruments, maybe a centralized infrastructure to deliver this would be sufficient. But if we talk about technology services or technology extension services, then maybe we need to take into account that these require more specialized structures to deliver the service. Therefore, more of a distributed structure would be needed. When we talk about financial mechanisms, we're talking about what is the methods to disburse the support, what are the requirements. And here the main point is that we need to try to avoid excessive burden on beneficiaries. Sometimes these are small companies that really lack the capability to do this, or if they do that, they would take time from their actual business. So that would be something to take into account. Let's move on to capabilities. And the implementation of STI policy instruments often require very specialized skills. And we need to assess what are these capacity needs before we start the implementation. So here, some of the questions that we want to ask ourselves is that, do we have expertise to manage complex grants programs, for example, if this is what we're dealing with? Do we have the capacity to evaluate innovative projects, which of course require different skills than simply evaluating an R&D project? Another question is, can we draft the operational manuals to really implement these policy instruments? Another dimension could be, for example, do we have a pool of specialized peer reviewers to help us in the selection process? And this is just to take one example. The peer reviewers is one issue because some countries may lack these peer reviewers, not because they don't have the expertise in a particular field, but just because these peer reviewers usually know the people that are conducting research or in their field, or they know the main actors, so they will lack this unbiased view. So we need to take this into account. Many countries, to solve this, have to go abroad to find these peer reviewers. And to finish, let's talk about digital infrastructure, which is the backbone of the operations and of the operational process. I have, as part of the Outlook, we have developed a case study where we saw that a scholarship program was receiving applications on paper, and the move to a digital system was key for the sustainability of the program. So let's move to the other dimension, which is the management quality. And I remind you, this refers to the leadership and the administrative structures. So let's start with the financial sustainability. Here, the main topic is adequate budgets. Do we have enough financial resources? But I would like to take it a little bit further. Do we have resources that are predictable over time? And this is a big challenge in developing countries, where implementing agencies depend a lot on donor funding, which is unpredictable in most cases. So this is something that is quite important. And another challenge that we see is that sometimes programs continue operating with inadequate resources due to political reasons or for a symbolic value. And this is dangerous because an instrument without adequate resources is an ineffective instrument. Let's go to
sorry, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, let me try to push here. So then let's talk about the human capital. This is quite important. We need to make sure that we are retaining well-trained staff. And try to try to find a way to motivate them and keep them in our organization. Monitoring and evaluation, we're going to discuss this further tomorrow, so I will not go into details, but here the main message is to try to establish a monitoring and evaluation framework early. try to use a complementary approaches of external internal evaluations, and make sure that we are using the results of evaluation to inform future decisions. And in the learning systems, which is our last dimension, I want to highlight that we really need to document experiences, make sure that we know what works, what doesn't work. We need to, something that I would recommend is that we know that in an STI system, there are multiple agencies implementing instruments. So if we create a network of program managers that share these experiences, they can really learn from each other and improve these implementation processes. So I would just like to highlight some key takeaways. Just to mention a few, please remember that success requires mastering all these dimensions that we mentioned, from implementation processes to learning systems. If one is not working properly, the entire system will be affected. I will also want that you not underestimate the importance of building implementation capacity. Before launching any instrument, ensure that your team has the right skills and competencies. Another point is that, well, securing sustainable funding is crucial, obviously. I know it's difficult, right? But try to secure enough funding for full pilots. This will help you build credibility, and then you can scale up based on this credibility that you build. But to do this, you really need evaluation. The evaluation is with this evaluation, you will be able to convey that your pilots are cost effective and are impactful. And finally, let's create these feedback loops. Let's try to systematically collect and analyze insights from our implementation, so we can have evidence to adapt our approaches over time. So with this, I thank you very much, and I pass the floor to you, Fernando.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you, Benny, for this very insightful presentation and setting the scene, and also for keeping an eye on the timing. Thank you. We will have a chance to ask questions, like more openly, a Q&A after the second presentation, where I would invite our colleague Oscar to take the floor. Of course, I see already some interactions in the chat, so please continue. But Oscar, if you can, please start sharing your presentation, and we can listen to you. The first case, sort of the first, after the trigger presentation, now we move on to the cases. Yeah. Oscar, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you just briefly confirm that you can see my slides, and then I will start?
It is there. It is there.
Yes. Excellent. So after having had a bit more of a general overview presentation, we would like to jump from the UN-IATT side a bit more into a concrete application, a concrete case study. So this case study is in the realm of innovation finance instruments. So as you can see on the slides, you have a very large heterogeneity and overview of different forms of equity instruments, of debt finance instruments, and also a differentiation between the private and the public sector that you can use if you're an entrepreneur to scale up your business. So the one entity that we look in particular at the UN-IATT are incubators and accelerators. Concretely, these incubators and accelerators conduct a competitive selection of firms, which they, so to say, welcome in cohorts, via which they convey to them various skills, such as how to raise funds, how to present their businesses in the market, how to sell their products, and in general, like how to grow and improve their startup business models. Here there are a few differences, like some of these cohorts can be basically entered on a permanent basis. Some of these programs are more temporary. And also the resources that are being offered by the various incubator and accelerator programs vary. Some of them offer just office space and some mentoring. Others also provide research assistance, export promotion support, or even their own networks as regards to potential funding providers or other entities. The direct funding amounts by incubators and accelerators are usually quite small. However, because they themselves know very often follow-on funding providers such as venture capital funds or business angels or other funding providers, they are very effective at matching startup firms and finance providers. Concretely, what we have been doing here in ECE is to support the network of incubators and accelerators for sustainable development in basically Central Asia and Azerbaijan. Concretely, this network consists of incubators and accelerators, which I've just described, innovation agencies, but also several other players such as venture capital funds. The activities that we have been promoting and implementing through this network have been workshops, such as, for instance, on topics such as circular economy, how to raise funds, but also how to improve the capacities of accelerators and incubators more generally. We also have conducted several panel discussions amongst all of these stakeholders across Central Asia. We have conducted roundtables. We have published a few publications with best practices for incubator and accelerator operations. And we have also conducted various study tours of incubators, accelerators, innovation agencies to other countries, like, for example, Georgia, where they could benefit from the innovation ecosystem experiences. So after having discussed and described a little bit what we have been doing, I would like to already jump straight to the challenges. So the one key challenge that we face when working with these incubators, accelerators, innovation agencies, and venture capital firms of Central Asia is data availability. Very often, it is not very easy to see which incubators and accelerator operate, what their exact challenges are, what their track records are, and also what their main objectives are. This also ties a bit into the second challenge that we face, which is a language issue. Very often in Central Asia, information are only provided in Russian language. And while we, of course, have staff on our team that speaks Russian and that understands Russian, some of us do not. And also, importantly, it can be said that some of our other partners from other countries that we use to match the incubators and accelerators with also do not speak Russian language, which causes us to very often hire additional translators, which implies costs and also some logistical efforts. Also, for some of the smaller meetings and smaller gatherings that we organize, like some online workshops, we, for example, do not have the luxury of providing translation support, which then, however, already narrows down the number and the type of participants that you can engage through such workshops. The third challenge that we have are logistical challenges, which basically imply things such as arranging for travels between the different Central Asian countries, but also between the Central Asian countries and other Eastern European countries, and of course between our headquarters. This, of course, is something that many of you will face for a variety of projects, but given the distances in Central Asia and the limited budget available, this is still quite an issue. Also, the fourth point is not to be underestimated, namely political tensions, as until I would say a couple of years ago, and potentially even now, there are different political interests of the respective countries, and there were also some actual tensions until quite recently, which you need to account for, especially when you engage several of these stakeholders. For example, engaging only a few select ones, even if they have more capacities, while not keeping others in the loop, could be a risky maneuver if you would want to implement something at the regional level. Also, it is only possible to engage a relatively limited number of participants, and also the heterogeneity of the participants for us is not always the highest possible. This is to some extent because of our mandate to focus on the innovation system, but also to a large extent because creating a network in Central Asia without having an office on the ground, and we as UN-IATT do not have an office on the ground, is definitely quite challenging. And basically maintaining these networks and engaging them over time is a task that we need to always need to grapple with. The next big challenge that ties a bit into the political tensions, but not necessarily, is the national versus regional thinking. And I'm pretty sure that this would not only be the case in Central Asia, but also in several other regions. What we can namely observe is that very often we can see efforts in relevant areas, like, for example, the reform of venture capital laws or like some taxation laws, or also the creation of registers of different innovation system players across several of these Central Asian countries, instead of having one overview or one database centralized across the entire Central Asian region. And also when we propose initiatives, not always, but also sometimes we get approached by one of the countries who says, okay, we would like really to take charge on this. And while we welcome this, it very often would be done with a national focus instead of a regional focus. And given how limited the volume of funding in terms of venture capital and angel investment for Central Asia is, this is quite a challenging issue that we need to account for. Also, as already mentioned now a few times, indirectly and directly, funding issues can be quite constrained as well, given that donor support programs for Central Asia and the Innovation Finance realm exist, but often not for the subset that we tackle. So for the incubators and accelerators, there are not that many programs. There are a few, but not many. And even if they support, they very often support directly through grant provision, but not necessarily by directly supporting our network, and gaining additional funding sources, especially in the current investment climate, is a bit tricky. Another tricky issue are geographical distances between the different Central Asian countries. For some of them, this is less of an issue. For others, it is more. And this is this is quite also something that we need to grapple with, both as regards to travel, but also as regards the opportunity to have in-person networking opportunities on a more regular basis, as this is simply very often not possible. Also, tying onto this previous point is the physical versus online presence, given that very often we can only conduct workshops in an online format. However, this has distinct disadvantages, as you could not do a lot of the networking. Many of the there's one person drawing right now on the presentation, I think, which is a bit if this could be removed, I would be very grateful. So okay, I will continue. So there is so as regards to physical online presence, there's also clear disadvantage in terms of networking, but also in terms of the interactive discussion of several of the topics. As even now, as you can see, we cannot have this conversation in person. We cannot read each other faces. We cannot have a more concrete discussion in many ways. And the communication challenge is a bit more, let's say, asymmetrical. And last but not least, another challenge that we face with regards to the network for business incubators and accelerators for sustainable development in the SPECA subregion, so basically in Central Asia, is also knowledge management. As very often, many of the learnings and the key findings that we communicate to our workshops are not maintained in a very systematic way and are not being evaluated. Sometimes on a, let's say, sporadic and individual basis, of course they are, but also what we can see is that, that very often this is not being done on a more systematic level. Finally, and very briefly, I would also like to mention a few challenges for incubators and accelerators themselves. So before, on the previous two slides, I was discussing more about some of the implementation challenges for us as UN-IATT and for our development partners, but also for the incubators and accelerators itself, it is quite a bit of a challenging issue because they very often lack attractive firms. They also have a limited availability of qualified mentors, given that most of these mentors have not been entrepreneurs, for example, themselves before. There's also a limited number of business angels and venture capital investors, and there are several other issues related to the availability of performance indicators to measure the performance, and also limited availability of external performance reviews. And if you combine these challenges for the incubators and accelerators by themselves and the challenges for us, you have quite a few different lanes that you need to account for. Now, given that I need to switch to another presentation, to another room where I need to give another presentation, I would like to very much thank you for your attention. I'm sure that you will have some questions. I will not be able to answer them in person, but I will now put my email in the chat, and I commit to getting back to your questions if you send them to my email address later today or early tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Many thanks, Oscar. Many thanks, and also for the effort to join us. And you know you need to run to a different meeting, but yes, there's a couple of questions there, so we appreciate if you later on put some effort to answer to the participants. One in particular is on the typical value, the typical dollar value of pre-seed funding for our guide, funding. But okay, you can maybe if anybody in the team can also answer that question. I think it's very contextual somehow, right? But if anybody has a comment on this question, just repeat, is the typical dollar value of a pre-seed funding. Yeah, I guess in case of startups. Anyway, but then, well, as I said, once we have heard the first couple of presentations, if there's anyone who would like to ask a sort of a question to the speakers, I mean, in particular to Manuel, who delivered the first presentation, if there is anybody who would like to address that to the speaker, this is the time. Please just raise your hand. I will monitor. We have a fair amount of participants, but I will do my best to identify. When that happens, maybe Manuel, in the case of what you have done in the review, do you see any? I mean, there's a question here. So, how can funding be secured for the transition from the pilot phase to the scaling phase, especially in least developed countries? Did you see anything in your review? You mentioned a review of policy instruments, or is there anything you can comment?
Yes, well, I mean, there is no recipe for mobilizing resources, right? Difficult to answer this. However, I think that I would like to highlight the relevance of having a good evaluation report or a good evaluation assessment of such pilots, because this will really help you build a business case of such pilot, and if you have a good business case that demonstrates that your pilot is effective, it's impactful, but that is also not only in terms of impact, effective in terms of delivering the expected impact, but also that it is cost effective, right? That it delivers a good, let's say, a value for money. Let's call it like this. It can really help unlock multiple sources of funding, which will not be only from the government, but you can also unlock the doors of philanthropy, or also, depending on the type of project, you can try to find support from the private sector. So I think that the main idea is to try to build the evidence for you to develop a good business case, and I think that's the first step, at least.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if I'm abusing a little bit my position, unless there's some question, let me just comment on this. I think there are two examples that I remember, and I think one of them is to have some kind of a portfolio approach when you design the instrument, right? So in the case, I remember when we started in Mexico, maybe 20 years ago, a bit more, with this idea of supporting the companies in the transition, exactly in this sort of the high-tech companies moving from high-tech some technology products moving into the pilot phase, into the implementation part, was to build some kind of a chain of intervention. So the government would start by identifying some of these promising technologies, and that would be a specific area of engagement with the researchers and some of the companies. And then the second level, once you have, then you would have a different program try to support the development of venture capital or some kind of lines of credits. And in addition to that, you would also have this program trying to address a little bit more of what Oscar was mentioning of incubation process. So to create this entrepreneurial behavior for the researchers, right? So you somehow build this strategy, and then you have some resources along that. It's not enough, maybe not, but at least this idea that what is it that sometimes the instrument focuses on a very specific dimension, whereas there are other factors that are not addressed by the public policy, and that in that case this portfolio approach helps. And the other case, and even I mentioned yesterday very quickly in one of the questions around SMEs, and it also can be that not all the funding needs to come from donors or from the government. Of course, here is a very specific context in the Basque Country. In the Basque Country, what they did is, okay, you have a big company that has some specific technological needs, And then what you do is you provide a space for SMEs, for startups to provide that solution. What you do as a government, you broker the relationship. Happens is that, of course, you take the risk of assuming that this startup or this small company is a legal entity, it's a valid entity. And in the process, what you do is that you commit the big company to provide the first contract. So whereas the small SME or the researcher is investing in the technology, then the company that is going to be the potential user of our technology assumes the risk of investing in this transition phase. So that can also be a different mechanism. But of course, again, in this case, as I said, the important context here is that the government of the Basque Country has a very long tradition of engaging with the companies. So there's a very strong communication with government and companies, and that enables a little bit of this sort of experimentation, right? Let's see, there's another question here, maybe Manuel or any other colleague in the team. How do we address the issue of stakeholder engagement in STI policy when, in case of recent market failures due to emerging technologies, we have different perspectives from academia, industry, startups, and policy units? So I guess it is really basically about the consensus. Or maybe Shivani, would you like to take the floor and explain your question before, instead of me trying to interpret it? Shivani?
Yeah, thank you.
If a colleague can allow her to take the mic.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando. And thank you, Manuel, for the presentation. My question goes mainly around, consensus among the different stakeholders when we are possibly designing an STI policy or say an AI policy, for at least for a regulatory approach or in a sandbox structure. How do we ensure that we get consensus, from the different units, as well as, we don't really impede or we don't really impede possibly the technological potential of the tech.
Thank you, Shivani. Manuel, would you like to address the question?
Yeah, I think that this goes a little bit more in the design part of the policy instruments. However, I think that what I would like to say is that when there are different stakeholders with maybe competing views, I think that it is the important thing is to really create dialogue platforms where we have this opportunity to communicate these different views, the concerns, and then make an effort to develop some sort of values and principles that can guide each of these stakeholders in their activities, which instead of finding these values and principles can help them define what it is their path without really focusing on what they are, what are their struggles or what are the competitive pressures that exist, but rather focusing on values and principles that are commonly agreed and that are good for the whole country and the whole society. So I think that I would like to focus on that, try to build these participative dialogue platforms, multiple stakeholders, where we focus more on the values and principles rather than on the constraints and competitive issues that we find.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for that answer. Maybe just take next question is Mr. Nasir from Pakistan. Can you please share the question with us, maybe just briefly, please, so that we have time to.
Thank you very much for providing the opportunity. I have one comment because getting a fund for policy implementation is a big problem across the globe. So I think this is very important to create a platforms and kind of a groups, which is actually provide a dialogue platforms for the proper stakeholder consultation. Ultimately, once the stakeholders or the companies which are very much connected with the policy implementation plans, they are providing some support for the execution plans. I hope this will be the better solution for secure the funds. This is my humble suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Nasser. Anybody else would like to ask a question or make a comment? I guess many of you have something that resonates with the conversation on how you deal with the multi-stakeholder processes, or how you deal with some of the challenges we face in terms of resources. If not, then of course there is more time that we can continue with the session. But if there's any just final question before we move on, please raise your hand, don't be shy. Otherwise, thank you, Manuel, and of course thank you to Oscar. And maybe I would now invite our colleague Angela. Angela, if you want to start sharing your screen and then start your presentation as soon as ready.
Yes, thanks, Fernando. Thanks, colleagues. Good afternoon, good evening. So today I will focus on a project we have run at the JRC, which brings a challenge-led approach to STI roadmaps. But why, first of all, we talk about roadmaps, STI roadmaps, because they can be conceived as systemic instruments for STI policy. They are conceived as strategic frameworks that can bring a challenge-oriented approach, meaning that they can give directionality to the policy and certain coherence to address sustainability challenges. Just to give you an overview of the key functions for those that are not very familiar with this concept, they can the STI roadmaps can, in general, the policy roadmaps can provide a long-term vision and bring a certain consensus of different stakeholders to a desired future, exploring alternative pathways in terms of innovation and technology solutions that can be used to get to that vision and to that desired future. And of course, they support the policy design, the planning and implementation. There are some benefits of using this approach. Just to mention a few, they use a systemic approach that means that they bridge different policy fields, exactly because they focus on challenges that by definition are multi-sectorial and multidisciplinary. And they foster also collective deliberation through participatory discussions and deliberations of the vision and pathways to be used. Of course, they come with challenges. For example, they don't very much align with the urgency and the complexity and uncertainty of sustainability transitions, because of course they require a certain time to be developed, and they don't necessarily match with the quick developments that are required for the achievement of certain goals. And also they might face some challenges in addressing systemic failings of policy process. But on the other hand, they really have a potential since they are versatile systemic instruments for strengthening directionality. So we've been at the JRC, we've been using this approach and discussing about this approach since 2018 within the context of the UN Interagency Task Team on STI for SDGs, which is in addition to this work stream on capacity building, as another one on specifically on STI for SDGs roadmaps, together with other UN agencies. We have worked on a number of outputs, including the preparation of a guidebook for STI for SDGs roadmaps, and also the Global Pilot Program, which in a way put in place put into practice the first STI for SDG roadmap developed with the guidebook. In 2022 at the JRC, we started using the approach to and develop even more the approach to in a specific project that was designed for Africa, for 5 African countries, and it was a project with the Directorate General of the European Commission on international partnerships. So as I was mentioning, this guidebook is step-by-step advice for practical policy making to develop the roadmaps. What we did at JRC was to translate this guidebook into a methodological, concrete methodological guidance to the countries. Using a challenge-led approach and also a place-based approach. What this means, I will describe it in a second. So in the guidebook, maybe the colleagues can share the link to the guidebook in the chat. In the guidebook, there is a step-by-step approach. You can see the 6 steps in this slide. So what we did was to provide tailored support to the countries on specific steps that they required, on which they required advice. And the idea was to prioritize STI objectives, STI areas to reflect then these STI objectives into projects for investment to deliver on the green and digital transition. So as a very first step, we following this guidebook, we collectively with the country team, one of the key features of our approach was to identify with them the sustainability challenge of focus, which it doesn't necessarily mean we focus on one SDG, but rather on a challenge, and a concrete challenge that the country is facing, and it's a challenge that is also aligned with the national priorities. Another feature of the approach is a diagnosis. So we are now in step 2, a diagnosis based on 4 key pillars, and I will go back to this in a second. And also the use of a co-creative and participatory approach, not only to gather information. So, for example, in the assessment of the current situation, we use this participatory and co-creative approach to collect more information, but also to develop the vision and to develop the actual roadmap and to identify the STI areas for investment collectively in joint deliberation. And this brings me to the last point, which is exactly this, the joint deliberation of the action plan together with the different stakeholders and the country team. Concerning the 4 main pillars, you see here that we focused on, first of all, once the sustainability challenge was identified, there was an in-depth analysis of the challenge area. So this was done through quantitative analysis, but also the analysis of policy documents. And also, as I was mentioning, reaching out to the different stakeholders through interviews. Concerning the STI potential analysis, we used both quantitative and qualitative analysis, so with analysis of key indicators, but also literature review, case studies, and interviews. And then the STI policy mix. In this case, the STI policy mix, of course, involves the analysis of stakeholder mapping, the different actors, and the instrument mapping, but they are not only related specifically focused on STI, they also relate to the specific challenge area of focus. This means that if the challenge of focus is on energy, we would look also at the policy instruments and actors in this area, and I will show you in a bit. Then these three pillars were triangulated. The findings of these three pillars were triangulated to start identifying STI investment opportunities that will be then discussed in a participatory and co-creative discussion with the different stakeholders. And you can see here we had different moments in which we reached out to the stakeholders through interviews, online and in-person workshops, stakeholder and policy surveys, and another round of interviews and final feedback on the findings. I will show you now the case of Seychelles very quickly, which maybe can be also useful for some of the participants being also an island state. Seychelles focused, identified as a sustainability challenge the use of STI to improve the energy efficiency and the application of renewable energy in the country. This is exactly the statement that the country team came up with to justify this decision. Based on this, we did the analysis of the challenge area, so what I was mentioning before, and the pillar 1, which showed us how the country is heavy relying on imported fossil fuels, how the country has inefficiencies in the electricity production, and also the fact that there is a rising electricity demand with limited renewable energy integration. But on the other hand, there is a great potential to further use the renewable energy in the country. We also analyzed the STI landscape. I will not focus too much on the findings. I just want to show the approach and the methodology we used. But for example, in this case, we understood better that one of the weaknesses of the research system is the small number of researchers, the small number of research infrastructures, and also very few research production on the challenge area of focus. We also went into the analysis in the third pillar, so in the STI policy mix analysis. So we went to the analysis of the different policies related to energy transitions that have a link to STI, and you see here an analysis of the findings. And the same for the STI policy landscape in relation to the challenge area of focus. Here you can see, for example, some policy instruments that are specifically on STI, but that have some linkages with the energy sector. These findings were then triangulated with pillar 4 of the methodology. So with the 3 findings from the 3 analytical areas on the sustainability challenge, STI potential, and STI policy mix, we came up with the identification of gaps and opportunities that brought us to a first identification of STI investment areas. For example, in terms of opportunities, it became clear that an expansion of the solar energy utilization would be possible. That energy efficiency could be improved with the use of smart grid technology development. Also, in terms of skilled professionals, there would be a need to strengthen the capabilities, and so on and so forth. This brought us to an in-person discussion, so a moment in which we asked the stakeholders, first of all, if the findings were reflecting the truth, the reality, and second, if these findings could be used to further identify STI investment areas and STI projects for investment. So what we did was to ask the participants of the workshop to reflect on possible technology that you see on the site that can be used to address the sustainability challenge, and we asked them to score them based on different criteria that you see instead on the horizontal axis. So they were asked to reflect on the relevance of this specific technology to the challenge area and the needs of the country, the skills available in this specific technology or the ease of developing the skills, the finance available for this technology, the infrastructure readiness, and also potential collaborators, partners that can be mobilized for the further development of this technology, and finally, potential funders. They scored these technologies. We also had a similar discussion, not only for renewable energy, but also for energy efficiency. And similar discussions also happened for non-technological innovation. So we inquired to the participants about social innovation or frugal innovation that could be used to address the sustainability challenge, and also about place-specific factors that can block, that can produce some barriers in the achievement of this, in addressing the sustainability challenge of focus. This was during a one-day workshop that we carried out in Seychelles, but also in other countries for this specific challenge area. And the findings, the inputs we received brought us to define an action plan, meaning the STI roadmap, that aims to contribute to address this sustainability challenge. So in this case, to improve energy efficiency and the uptake of renewables in the country. And this action plan is reflecting the actions recommended, the lead, so who is in the lead of implementing the action, the partners involved, the output and expected outcomes, and the timing for initiation. In this case, the roadmap includes 13 proposed actions, but in other cases it was slightly different. And all the actions can be reconducted to some areas and rationale for policy recommendations. That can be summarized here into 4 points. I will mention just a few. One quite prominent is the integration of energy and STI policies. We found that the two different areas of policies are not talking to each other. Basically, the STI policy and policy instruments are sometimes lacking a bit in specific and concrete actions. They're a bit broad. And the same applies for energy policies and energy instruments that are mentioning STI as a potential tool to improve for example, the energy efficiency, but there are no concrete actions or resources allocated to that. Another interesting point is also the development of the workforce and increase of the research infrastructure. We found, for example, that there is a lack of educational programs in the energy sector, and as we know, this is something that for an island state is particularly important to develop the local understanding and ownership of these topics. So just to conclude, I just want to share this the key message that policy roadmaps can be used as systemic instruments, but to do that, it's important to secure stakeholder engagement from the very beginning. And throughout the different stages of the design and implementation of the roadmap. It's important indeed to achieve participatory deliberation, which is based on a strong evidence coming from a thorough analysis of the context, not only focusing on STI related topics or policies, but also on the specific challenge that we are aiming to address. And finally, the roadmaps are not conceived to be designed and implemented in a vacuum, but they should be integrated into the STI policy and governance. So this means that the relevant stakeholders should be involved, and the relevant policies should be analyzed and considered to align them to the roadmaps and vice versa. I will stop here, and I'm available for questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I see, some of the issues you raised in terms of policy coordination and securing the stakeholder engagement. I think resonate with some of the questions. Yeah, maybe just because it's very right now, is renewable energy the most pressing need for Seychelles?
Well, that's a very good point. What I didn't mention is that when we had the very first discussions with the country teams on the scoping of the challenge area of focus, we clarified that we didn't want to focus on the most pressing need or priority for the country. This was a way for us, but also for the country team to demonstrate the methodology, to test the methodology, and also learn by doing while developing the roadmap. So it's not the most pressing challenge for Seychelles, but it's one of those, because indeed it's present in the national development plan, and also present in some other policy documents. So it's there, but it's not probably the most urgent.
Thank you, Angela. Well, we have a lot of time, but I mean, I will perhaps pass now to the next presentation. Thank you, Angela. To the case of South Korea, which is usually an interesting case. So I will ask Dr. Son to start your presentation, and after this one, we will have again an open Q&A. So please, Dr. Son, if you can start your presentation and follow by a moment for interaction with the audience. But I can see also that you continue to engage in the chat. So I will pick some of those questions later on, and we can reiterate some of those to the speakers. But now, for now, finish yours, Dr. Son, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is In-Kyung Son, and I'm head of Sustainable Innovation Policy Research Office at Science and Technology Policy Institute, which is one of the government research institutes under the Prime Minister's office in Korea. And I'm very grateful to be a part of this UN-IATT training session. And in my presentation, I would like to share very briefly a current status of the Korean government's effort on promoting STI for SDGs and some of the challenges that I actually have faced as a policy researcher working in the STI for SDG topics. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So next slide, please. So IATT have long stressed on the importance of connecting these three different national plans to make our STI for SDG efforts more effective. National development plans and STI plans and SDG plans. And the interactions among various stakeholders in these three circles are very critical, and especially the interaction between STI community and SDG community to identify SDG related problems and find STI solutions are important. And in Korea, we do not have had the National Development Plan any longer since 2000. So what's happening between STI community and SDG community is key to understand the current status of Korea. STI plan and SDG plan for a long time, each policy had been planned and implemented separately. But finally, around 2020, we have observed that SDG basic plan has made a connection to National Science and Technology Plan. Next slide. Next, please. So according to the Sustainable Development Basic Plan, the new plan, all R&D activities promoted by the Korean government are now categorized into SDG 9. There are two indicators, R&D expenditure as a proportion of GDP and researchers per millions inhabitants. And following these graphs can give you a big picture of how Korea is doing in terms of these two indicators. So Korea has been a very active investor in terms of R&D intensity over the last 2 decades. The country invests over 5% of its GDP in R&D this year. And as for the R&D ratio, Korea ranks the first among G20 countries and the second in OECD countries. And please. So in absolute amount of R&D investment, Korea ranks the fifth after US, China, Japan, and Germany. In fact, Korea shows the most steep rising lines here in terms of R&D intensity, which the Korean government and STI community are very proud of. Next, please. And next, please. So when we look at the numbers of researchers, same stories are here. So you can check these slides later. And please jump to the slide 12. Yeah, thank you. But we all know that STI is not only about R&D and researcher numbers, and not only about for SDG 9. When it comes to the STI for SDG, we are seeking for a bigger role of STI to tackle grand challenges. And STI cannot be a right solution for everything. But we understand STI has some potential to contribute to all 17 SDGs. Next, please. So my research team mapped the Korean STI activities for SDG with the public R&D project data. And since 2011, the Korean government has archived all the information of public R&D projects, including search title, keywords, abstracts, expected outcomes written by principal investigators. And in this database, there is no SDG code, unfortunately. So we made a list of SDG keywords in Korean identified by each SDG expert groups of total 39 experts in 17 goals. So what was very shocking for us at the beginning, there is less than 1% of public R&D projects that directly tells that their R&D activity can tackle one of the SDG goals. That's why we made a list of SDG keywords and identify R&D projects that have potential to be connected to SDG achievement. And next, please. So this graph shows a general trend of R&D expenditure that have a significant level of potential impact on each SDG goal from 2011 to 2021 based on the keyword analysis. Although there are too many lines in this graph, you can find a very clear trend of SDG R&D investment with a steady and increase over the time. And especially this graph shows the SDG R&D investment pattern before and after of the SDG adoption in 2016. Next, please. However, SDG adoption does not seem to make a significant or real impact on STI investment decision in Korea. In fact, the increase of SDG related R&D may tend to just follow to the increasing pattern of total government R&D investment. Next, please. So I explained already the Korea is very active at R&D investment. And next, please. So this slide is about what are the top priority areas of the Korean government R&D investment, and top SDG goals with the biggest size of investment is SDG 9, innovation, industry, and infrastructure, which accounts for about 63% of total public R&D investment. And it shows the economic growth through STI investment is still the top priority on the national government level. But the second and the third are the SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, and SDG 11, sustainable cities. On the other hand, SDG 1, poverty, is the area with the least R&D funding. Of course, the scope of each SDG goal is different, and the variation among 17 goals is too huge to make it hard for comparative analysis. However, at least this number shows which direction scientists and engineers are heading to in Korea. Next, please. So challenges. What are the most challenging issues for us to promote STI for SDG policy in Korea? And there are two serious misperceptions on SDGs in the Korean society that eventually lead to little interest of STI community in SDGs. Although there are three dimensions of environment, society, and economy in SDG, many people in Korea perceive the environmental dimension of SDG mostly. It is mainly because SDG plan was coordinated and implemented by the Ministry of Environment, and STI plan by Ministry of Science and ICT. And also Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been in charge of international development cooperation strategies and plans. And because of this fragmented structure of STI for SDG governance, there have been misconceptions on the SDG, such as, oh, SDG is all about environmental regulation. So it is really critical to build the right institutional and governance framework that connects STI and SDG in policy fields. So throughout series of issue raising from scholars and experts, finally in 2022, we made a effort to solve this issue by making a new framework act on sustainable development, which is now responsible of the Prime Minister's office for across government policy coordination. Next, please. And the other misconception is that SDG is ODA. Of course, ODA is one of major approaches to tackle SDG, but it's not the most attractive approach to make scientific community and the private sectors to be engaged in reality. It may be a cultural thing in Korea, but also SDI efforts to address global challenges like SDGs is not reflected or appreciated much in STI evaluation system. For example, university professors and researchers' activities in SDG are not a major indicator in their R&D performance assessment. So same for research institutions and university evaluations. So most high values are still placed on the research outputs rather than research outcomes with the societal impacts. Therefore, there are many claims that at least public R&D evaluation should be based on the public vision rather than academic achievements or economic values. And that's what we are currently working on. And in short, Korean STI community has been conducting research with a high level of potential contribution to the SDG achievement without knowing the potential actually. And the reason why I put this figure on the left side of the slide is that we have implemented all different policies separately depending on each different goals. But what I am emphasizing here is that STI for SDG requires all these different policies should be aligned and connected together. And next, please. So lastly, final two takeaways I can give are the first one is governance and the legal framework of SDG matters, especially on the stage of implementation, because it significantly influences how the STI community perceives and responds to SDGs. And the second one is a transformative STI policy is required. And what I mean by that is we have tried to achieve SDG with the conventional STI policy tools, but we learned that it's not enough. What we need is to transform our STI ecosystem or research culture to fit to our society and to serve the needs of our society well. For example, changing the evaluation system of researchers, R&D projects or R&D programs can be one of the good new approach for the effort. So I would just say transformative STI policy matters to what extent the STI community proactively contribute to SDGs. So this is all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Son, for a very interesting presentation. I think it's this dimension of research that you are bringing up in terms of the connection of research with SDGs. In some other contexts, I've seen this named in a way that, to what extent research addresses national development problems or challenges, right? So what is the connection and the pertinence of research, and especially the role of peer review and directionality, right? How to motivate researchers to address those questions that you're bringing up. I think it's a major issue when it comes to implementation, because governments may have a very clear, or I mean, assuming they have a very clear idea, but it has to match with the incentives of the communities or the actors that are going to be responsible to implement those policies in the end. And if there's no match, then of course that's already an issue that needs to be addressed during the sort of the thinking around the implementation plan. Let me think so. Let me just before meet some, and let me just with Mr. Khaled. You had a question here on the implementation, the parameters for implementation. Would you like to take the floor and ask your question to the speakers? Mr. Khaled at the logo. If you can ask, or otherwise, I mean, just let me know if not, but it would be, maybe you can just elaborate your question and get some feedback from our colleagues. No? I think he's no longer there. Anyway, so then Dr. Mirza, then you're raising your hand. Please, can you raise your question, please?
Thank you. I just want to thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I would like to ask, because Korea has set an example for other countries for investment of science, technology, R&D, up to 5% of the GDP. The biggest challenge is to convince the politicians and policymakers and the parliamentarians, because it's a policy issue at the national level, which is to be addressed by the decision makers. So just I would like to know a little about the role of the politicians and the decision makers in Korea, how they have convinced the community and financial managers to spend this much of the GDP for R&D and science and technology. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Sun, would you like to take that question?
Yeah. So thank you very much for your questions and interest in the Korean case. Your question is how the policymakers or the government convinced to invest a lot of portion of our GDP in the R&D, right? First of all, culturally and historical background, we are very generous to invest in the R&D because we do not have other resources, natural resources to invest, and we have only human to invest. So that's were the major assumptions to begin with. And when you look at the R&D data of the Korea, 75% or sometimes almost 80% of R&D comes from the private sector, and only 25 or 20% R&D comes from the governments. That means that the private sector, government don't want to push the private sector to invest in R&D, but when we look at the industrial structure of our country, we are very heavily dependent on the STI-oriented industries like Samsung and Hyundai Motors, those kind of industries. They are the key players in our national economy, and they want to invest R&D to get to maintain a high level of technological competitiveness in the global market to survive. So maybe that's mainly caused from our industrial structure of our economy.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. Dr. Nasir, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I understand for this deliberation, that the synchronization of the SDGs goal with the STI policy of the country is a vital, significant component for its implementation. So, Angela, would you like to elaborate this point that how to cover the gaps between the policy of STI policy and the SDGs goals? Because this kind of gaps are very significant not to implement the policies properly. Would you like to highlight this point, please?
Thanks, Dr. Nasir. Well, this is also a $1 million question. From what I can say based on other experiences, I think there are some steps that can help. First of all, is first to understand the gap, what is missing, how the STI is present in other policy areas, and if the challenges or the SDGs are present in the STI policy or STI policy instruments. So this is a first way to understand and have a good picture of the scenario of the current context. Then, for example, in the context of the approach we use, the challenge-led approach, this is by definition an approach that aims to cover this gap, because in the moment you want to achieve a certain goal, you want to address a sustainability challenge, you necessarily need to include this challenge into the STI policy and concretely make steps and actions to address the challenges. So that's why the policy roadmaps are used also with this idea of covering the gaps between the SDGs and the STI policy frameworks.
Thank you very much, Angela.
If I may complement, Angela's answer, and I think that just we need to highlight that currently there are also other types of policy instruments that can help us achieve this directionality and this alignment with the SDGs. Currently, there is a lot of work going with, for example, mission-oriented instruments like challenge-oriented innovation funds, different type of instruments that try to address broader goals. But what I would like to highlight here is that if we start thinking about the implementation dimension, these type of instruments are very much different than the typical research funds. They really require different skills and different processes to be implemented. This type of instruments require a lot of more engagement with society, with multiple stakeholders, not only to define which ones are the missions or which ones are the challenges that we want to address, but also in the actual implementation part, in the operationalization part. So the message that I want to give is that we need to be aware of other type of instruments that can be more adequate to give this directionality to the policies and to align with the SDGs. And second, that we need to also invest in the capacities required to design them and implement them, which is not the same capacities that we use to create a normal research fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, and also Dr. Angela. Thank you, Miss or Mrs. Rofani. I think you've been waiting for some time. Can you please unmute yourself and raise your point, please?
Yes. Thank you very much. My question goes to the Madam In Young for the Korean STI as an example. So I heard that you highlighted that STI implementation to achieve SDG in Korea takes place on the research output majority as R&D evaluation, such as publication you mentioned that I heard, rather than economic value. Therefore, when to achieve Korea achieve SDG 9, the most dominant achievement, there is also infrastructure. So my question that does this publication including on the building of infrastructure on STI implementation? And the second question, does this publication as well provide the economic value feedback for the Korea? Thank you.
Dr. Tan, please.
So what I made comments in the during my presentation is that when it comes to STI for SDG implementation in Korea, academic performance like publication or patent and economic values are mostly important with a high priority from the Korean government rather than research outputs with societal impacts. And also you mentioned that the STI the infrastructure portion of SDG 9, yes, we do a lot of activities related to infrastructure. I don't know whether my answer, my comments answer to your questions. So.
For the first question, yes, I mean, thank you, quite precise. But for the second, for the infrastructure to achieve on the most majority SDG 9, that the publication pattern and the economic value involving on the building infrastructure to achieve the SDG, of course. That's what I mean. The infrastructure that you mentioned, because I saw on your slide on SDG 9, there is written infrastructure, right? So therefore, the question that the publication pattern, then bringing the economic value, precise examples building infrastructure that you have already built up. An example, just simple an example.
Yeah. I think I'm not a right person to answer the long list of the infrastructure cases, but I'm sure there are much more activities on the infrastructure related to SDG 9, much more than STI related activities in Korea. If you give me the, I think I can email you with some examples of them.
Yeah. We can continue.
Thank you. So then you please your email somewhere in the chat, Dr. Sun or Mr. or Miss. Yeah. So please, and then we have one question here, Miss or Mr. Sami. please unmute yourself and make your point.
Thank you very much. So I will be speaking to the last speaker. I like the way, she was able to disaggregate R&D funding from the government by, for each, SDGs. And I was wondering how were they able to do that? Because in many instances, when you have a project, the issue is that some of those SDGs are, incorporated in one project. How were they able to disaggregate funding to know exactly what funding will go to what SDG? I'll be interested in knowing the methodology behind that. Thank you.
So in terms of methodology to estimate the ratio of R&D of GDP, we just follow the international guidelines proposed by OECD and World Bank. So I think there is some standardized procedure to follow. In Korea, we have some national government procedure to make a budget for the next year, 1 year in advance. So we have a very systemic R&D budget process and monitoring the R&D operation and expenditures after that. So it's very systemic and comprehensive procedure that I would like to share later if there is any chance. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Son. Yeah, thank you. So there's just a couple of questions also for you in case of Korea. There's one on whether investing in renewable energy is a priority, and also if there is any tax reduction for private sector R&D investment in the country. Just two questions I see in the chat. Yeah.
So first question is about the investment in renewable energy technology. Yes, we do. And we think that energy is one of our critical sectors that we are focusing on because most major industries where Korean economy are heavily depending on are the many manufacturing companies and sectors, including shipbuilding or petrochemical industries. Those industries are very energy intensive. So supplying sustainable and affordable energy is one of our top priority to make our industry continue to work and sustain. So we are very high level of priority on the renewable energy and also overall energy technology R&D investment. And the second question is about tax reductions. So of course we do. So in the previous presentation, there were a very long list of types of policy tools to promote STI for SDGs, and tax reduction is one of them. And I think our governments try to mix all kinds of policy tools to make the STI for SDG, not only the SDG efforts, but overall the government efforts work very effectively. We use variation and the mix policy tools, including tax reduction. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Son. Maybe we have time for maybe one quick question, one or two quick questions, if there's any. It's been very interesting and very active discussion, so I really appreciate the participants for that. If you have any other question, otherwise we will start slowly wrapping up, but just in case anybody has anything else to share with us, maybe a comment or a question. Otherwise, what I would like to do now, and maybe we can also have a little bit of discussion there, is if you help me to put the Mentimeter question now. One of the Mentimeter questions where we try, the intention of this question is to We have spoken about, yesterday we talked about the design of policy instruments, and today we talk about the implementation of those instruments. So in this Mentimeter question, if you help me put it up on the screen, please, Fitri. So one of the things that we have heard is, there is of course a role for government, right? And so Manuel mentioned some of the challenges that you face, but then can you have a reflection maybe in terms of what would be needed? Yeah, particularly what is it that you could see as a sort of areas where more work needs to be done in terms of what is it that can be a way to address those bottlenecks. Yeah, and I see very clearly, bureaucracy and sometimes the flexibility. Of course, we are aware that many governments need to be accountable for what they do, but sometimes that creates they reduce their ability to actively act or react to some emerging challenges, right? And or to plan some things where you have a lot of bureaucratic procedures. Yes, and then I think that's also why we do these kind of sessions where we try to create a space for policymakers or academics to get together and talk. Please, I mean, I see there's 143 participants, so please, if you can give us your answers. Certainly, bureaucracy remains the main point, but this opportunity for knowledge sharing, I think, also relevant. But I'm sure there are many others, and some of the ones that we have seen, and again, that's why we do these kind of trainings, is because many policymakers, they are very busy dealing with the everyday duties, and they have very little opportunities to read, to interact, to get themselves a little bit more time to study more, to learn a bit more of what's happening in the world. So I think this is very clearly now, this red tape and bureaucracy, that is one of the barriers or one of the issues that needs to be addressed when trying to, address some of the challenges that we heard today. Of course, yes, Ferry here is also reminding us that that's also one of the reasons why the and some other networks exist in the world that allows the value of the network is to allow those exchanges and mutual learning. Yeah, please, Ferry, if you want to say something, and then I think we can stop this. But Ferry, please, of course.
Sure, thanks. Yes, actually, I wanted to remind our colleagues, STI policy experts and colleagues from Asia Pacific, that STEPAN is the network actually that was shaped and relaunched in 2021 for this main purpose of knowledge sharing and finding solutions for STI challenges in Asia Pacific, specifically through collaboration. It currently has 20 members, and in the next months, we are also expanding invitations for countries to join this network, and also for those who don't have active membership to activate it. So it would be great if you, through the main ministries and entities in charge of STI policy making in your countries, can also join this network. And we will follow up, of course, with further capacity building through this network. Thanks.
Thank you, Ferry. Thank you very much. And just to remind also our colleagues from UNESCO kindly replied to this question on methodologies. There is significant work they have created or developed in the last few the years on the measurement, not only of R&D, but also some of the issues that are relevant for capturing the role of SDGs, because then you have the STEPAN network and the link to the STEPAN network in the chat. Well, I think we are getting to the end of our session, and today we've been very, very diligently keeping time. I would also like to appreciate those of you who have made it this far with us, that you remain with us. Thank you very much for those who took the floor and shared with us some questions, some comment. For those of you in the chat, I will not attempt to sort of make a brief summary, but I think what is important to just highlight here is that implementation, it's a complex process where experimenting learning, engagement with many actors is relevant. It's not just about resources. It's also about the strategic intent to allocate those resources and to find partnerships and do some of the additional efforts. Maybe what we do this sort of finalizing. Dimo, can you or Perry, can you just share the last link to the Mentimeter? We don't need to have the Mentimeter on the screen, but it's just again for you to give us some final remarks, some final comments. This is important for us because, of course, as much as we'd like to share with you some knowledge, we would also like to learn from you and sort of the things that you like, the things that you think could be better. Maybe just one or two words of what is the key messages that you take with us. And of course, any also idea, and the intention not to put in the screen, just also for you to feel free to say something that we might want to take into consideration in developing these programs further for next session, either with you or with other regions. This is a feedback now that we would really appreciate from you. And please, I see there's a few of you there, but please take a moment. We have a couple of minutes before the close of the session, but I would definitely appreciate your feedback on what you mean are the takeaway message from the session, in anything you think could be of use for you. Other than that, tomorrow we have the final, not the least important session, and I think this is one of the most relevant. Just the link to the Mentimeter, you could scroll there. Otherwise, if you have your phone, you can also scan it on the screen, and that will take you directly to the Mentimeter. Tomorrow we have this very important dimension of monitoring and evaluation, which Manuel mentioned. It's one of the pillars, and that's because we will learn tomorrow, or we discuss tomorrow. There's many people just for accountability purposes, where we forget the very important dimension of learning, policy learning and experimentation, and require some steps to improve and to see what is going on and how we are doing. So please, it is the same time, I think the same link. The other colleagues will join, but of course, please keep an eye on the activities of the group. If you like these sessions, please also give us some feedback. But for the moment, I would just take this moment to thank you all for being with us. See you tomorrow. Thanks for the colleagues, and good continuation of your day. Thank you very much.